Stewart's Lucky Wiggler is this head style. Um, it's a little different. I add legs to it, and this is basically a diver. It'll pop in the surface, and it's a diver. And the colors on this, they're not real bright. They're kind of olivey colors, but they're nice natural colors, and this is a pretty good fly. So let's go ahead and let's get started. I'm going to do this video in 3 parts. I'm going to begin with the tail, and then I'll spin the deer hair, and then the third part will be I'll finish the fly out. So I'm going to use a partridge predator hook. This is a size 2. For these, this is a pretty light wire hook. And it makes the fly nice and bouncy, and it's a good hook for bass and stuff. If I were going to tie these bigger, which I do, and tie them for like muskie or pike, I would go to the Predator XL and have a little heavier hook. But I do like this light wire hook. It keeps the fly nice and light, easy to cast, and nice and bouncy in the water. So the first thing I'm going to do, as always, is I'm going to sit here and I'm going to come in and crimp the barb. I only fish barbless hooks. I don't think you need a barb to catch fish, and it definitely facilitates unhooking yourself a lot easier and unhooking the fish a lot easier. So my first step is with all my tails, I'm going to come in here with a little file. I'm just going to rough up this surface just to give it a little bit of tooth, because this is where I'm going to be tying my tail in. Okay, and then I'm going to come in with a little Zap-A-Gap, and I'm going to brush this with a little Zap-A-Gap, and then this is just UTC waxed nylon thread. It's 140 denier. So I'm just going to start by wrapping it through that glued down area, and between putting a little bit of tooth on the hook shank and adding the Zap-A-Gap, this is going to get really locked in to the it's going to get really locked into that spot, because I want my tailing material to all occur right here where these thread wraps are. I don't want to have them drift forward into the fly, because I'm going to preserve the rest of the fly for the deer hair head. So now let's come in. I'm just going to use some multicolored silly legs, and I'm going to start my tail with this. This is pretty much what the Stewart fly has in it. I'm being reasonably close to the original tail. A few different materials, a few different differences, but not a lot. So the way I'm going to do it is I folded it over the thread. I'm going to come down here, drop it right down to the front edge of that tie-in area, like that. Give a wrap or two in front to make sure it's secure. Now draw it back. Should stay in place. Pull it a little bit, and then come back and wrap it in place. So now let's come back. I want this tail to be maybe about 2 to 2 1/4 times the shank length of the fly. Maybe it can be a little bit longer than that. The next step is I'm going to use some cream colored Super Boo, or you could use a cream colored turkey marabou as well. Just going to get 1 feather. I'm going to end up with 4 feathers on this fly. So it's going to be a pretty robust tail. So what I do is I stream this back, and I want it to be maybe a hook shank length to hook shank area, the body length, double that to roughly that area. Again, there's not any real perfect measurements on this. I like my tails to be about 2 times my body length, roughly in that area. Now, I'm not going to tie this down and then lift it up and cut it. The reason is I get a little sloping area at the front. So instead, I'm going to take my thread to the back of the tie-in area, line those cut butts up with the front, and then come and wrap through. And I'm going to create this little tie down area right here. Okay, now this little tuft right here is real important. You want to maintain this tuft and not wrap over the top of it, because if you do, you'll get a sloping head and stuff will start to slide off the front end. So you want to, remember, you want to really preserve this front end for the deer hair work. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add, this is a little gold holographic flash. I'm going to again come to the front of the hook shank, wrap it over the hook, wrap it around the thread, draw it down right where I want it, right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just doing a couple loose wraps. Then I can push this material out around the super boo that I tied in there, and I'll come back and trim that out. That way the material is kind of distributed around. Now I'm going to layer up some colors. They're going to kind of match my body color. First one is going to be yellow, and this is a yellow grizzly, so same thing. Come in here and stroke it back. What I like about these feathers is you can see they have a little taper to them. Turkey is very blunt on the end. This is, it's got a little more webbing up top, and it's a little thinner, but it's very much like turkey marabou. So I kind of measure it up there, come in, cut it, and again, draw that thread to the back, line stuff up, and then just wrap your thread down over that little tie-in area right there. And kind of come forward a little bit here. But again, maintain that little tuft of material in the front. You're going to want to keep that there. Now, I'm going to transition. As I go up, I'm going to keep getting darker. So this is kind of a golden olive super boo. And there's no magic to the color thing. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can put one color back here if you want. I'm sure the fly would still fish real well, but I do like the layered colors. I think they look nice, and they have sort of a natural appearance. So same thing here, just line stuff up and come in here and keep that tie down area. Turn that up a little bit. And then my last one I'm going to put in here is just a dark olive. And so you can see I've kind of transitioned from this cream colored belly up through some yellow into that golden olive. And then the top of this will be this dark olive. And this is a bigger, more robust tail than I do on my poppers. The marabou, or the super boo rather, is going to be kind of the bulk of my tail on this fly. Whereas my side feathers, I'm going to put some feathers along the side here. And I don't know if you want to think of them as leg feathers or what you want. I think this pattern probably more simulates a little bait fish in the surface than anything else. But I am making the super boo is going to be the bulk of this pattern. So you can kind of see here, you can see the transitions in the colors. I've got a nice robust tail here. Okay, now I'm going to use just some whiting hen capes, grizzly dyed. I'm going to do one yellow and one olive on each side. So let me pick some feathers here. And I'm only doing 2 feathers per side as opposed to 3 like I'll do on my popper type flies, where the legs are a little more pronounced. Okay, so let's grab an olive here. Now what I'm gonna do here, I'll do it on camera, I'm just gonna kind of marry up the tips of this. And then, there we go. You can see they've married up pretty nicely. Just to show you what I'm doing, the curve is going to go out. So the inside feather will be the yellow. I always put the lighter, and again, I don't think there's any magic to this either, but the inside feather will be the lighter one, and the outside feather will be the darker one. So I'll put on that far leg first, and again, I'm going to do about 2 times the length of the body. Now you'll notice I did not trim this the way I trimmed the marabou. That's because when I come in here and I wrap with my thread, now one of the things that'll help you not get the feathers flying around is do a couple loose wraps, then tighten down on it. And then wrap in here. And then I'll come in and right up to that butt, I'll trim it. So that did a couple things. One is, you can see it's sitting along the side there. One, it gathered more of the barbules together, and so it just added more material into the leg, whereas if I cut it and just tied the stem in, I would have that same effect. Also, I think gathering the barbules helps to keep the 2 feathers married together, and they don't splay around quite as much. So let's do this other side. Now the other side, it's real easy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach across here, take these tips, and then pull them across and match up my tips. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but what I do, let's see if I can kind of demo it. I lay the feather here, and then I match up the tips and then kind of hold it in place. Okay, so I'm going to put the vise back upright again, and I'm going to do that. Lay that in there, marry up those tips, match those tips to the same length, come hold it right there. Again, a couple loose wraps, then tighten down on it. That'll help keep the feathers kind of married together. And there we go, that looks pretty nice. So there you can see the feathers. You can kind of see that tail splayed out along the side. But again, you can see how robust the rest of the fly is. This is going to give the fly a lot of movement, a lot of texture. I think that's the key. I think one of the keys to good bass flies is you want to have a lot of movement and a lot of texture. And the other thing this will do, and I'm going to add a hackle collar here, is it helps to transition from the deer hair to the tail. I don't like flies that have a big deer hair head and then like nothing hardly for a tail, just a little skinny whatever thing for the tail. I think you need a nice transition with that. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some just American, this is actually a whiting streamer cape, which is basically the same thing as a whiting American, it's just that it's a little smaller around. It's still got this has lots of feathers in it. And this one is also an American whiting cape. I picked through it. It's right down to about a half a cape. And I'm going to create, these two are going to give me the feathers for my hackle collar. So let's grab a couple of them here, and I think 4 feathers ought to do it. That'll give me a nice robust collar. Okay, so when you look at these feathers and you start measuring the barbules, this is not like a Catskill style dry fly where the length of the barbules, the hackle collar has to be pretty precise. A Catskill dry fly, it's 1.5 times the hook cape. Bass bugs aren't nearly, you don't have to worry about it. You can come a little short of the gape, you can go a little longer. I don't like to get too carried away. I don't like it to be like 2 times, 2 or 2.5, 3 times the width of the gape. But anything from the gape, or say 9/10 of the gape, up to 1.5 times the gape probably works fine. Now what I've done is I've married these feathers together, and the way I add hackle to flies, I do this for my dry flies, my parachutes, everything. I come in here and I marry all these feathers together. Then I come and I'm going to cut off here. Then I take the bottom and I brush these barbules out straight. Like that. Now I come in here and I trim along each side. And what I've done is I've created this little brush. And it doesn't really matter, you got curve. So, if you have the curve go back, that's wet fly style. If you have the curve go forward, that's dry fly style. I just put this on wet fly style, but again, I don't think that matters in the scheme of things. I don't think in a finished fly you could even tell which way I did. Get my bottle off a little bit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Dave's Flex Cement. And you can see that this bottle is a pretty well used bottle. That's because I just kind of keep refurbishing it with goop cement, which is a common cement. I like to use this really because it can be commonly found in any hardware store or even maybe at your grocery store. Rather than some other cements I've seen other people use, they're harder to find. And this does a good job of doing a couple things. One is locking these thread wraps in place. So what I do is I take my bottle, I put a little goop in it, and then I put toluene in it. And toluene will thin out the paint. And I try to keep this, roughly maybe a little bit, maybe the viscosity of water to a little thicker. It's actually a little thicker than water, but it's still fairly thin. Toluene is a toxic substance, so you don't want to leave it in where you're going to be breathing the fumes. I just leave mine out in my garage, and I just add dropperfuls into the bottle as needed. And I kind of have this continuous bottle of Dave's Flex Cement going along. And I don't know if Dave's Flex Cement was originally the same formula as goop, but it's really close. So let me open it up here. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to add a drop to these thread wraps. As it soaks down in, that will really help to kind of bind everything together. And I'm going to wrap my Hackle collar, through over the top of that glued in area. So let's start here. We'll tick, and I do it one Hackle at a time. So we'll wrap forward here. I can maybe get one more wrap. And I stop there. Now, here's one of the things about this. Don't pull real hard on this. If you do, your thread will tend to want to slide off the front edge. And ideally, I have flat flies where it has it. It's not the end of the world if it does, but ideally you kind of want to keep it up there. 2 wraps should be plenty. Actually, 1 wrap is almost enough with the glued in area. Plus, you're going to be wrapping back over it again when you add the other Hackle. So I'm just going to kind of keep filling in the spaces here. Come back here. And I'm just going to do 1 wrap this time. That should be enough. Now I'll start adding my yellow Hackle here. And kind of just start blending it in. Kind of take it in through. I guess that's maybe enough. This feather's a little shorter, so I won't get as many wraps with it. Do 1 more thread wrap there. 2 more. Now I'm going to come in, I'm going to take these tips right here, I'm going to just cut them out. Trim out the front here, edge. Now what I'll do is I'll bring my thread down to the hook shank and I'll finish out right here. Just do a whip finish. Tie it up, cut it, and there you have it, the tail. You got a lot of material there. This tail's going to have a lot of nice movement in the water. With the Hackle collar and the feathers, it'll be a nice transition between the deer hair head back through the collar once it gets wet. And this is the collar. This is the collar I'm tying for this particular fly. Now, one of the things about this is you've got to put this one aside. You can see I've tied up a bunch of tails here. You want to put this one aside because you got that glue in on the thread wraps, and so you're going to want to let that glue cure, because if you do it too quick, and you'll see when I go to the deer hair section of what I do to get the feathers out of the way, the glue sometimes will tend to bleed up into the feathers if you haven't let it cured. So there you go. There's the tail, and that is the end of part one of this.